Alright guys, welcome back. And so today we're going to be doing a review and comparison of two books. So the first one here is If Cats Disappear from the World, and the second one here is The Memory Police. So for starters, I'll do a quick summary of If Cats Disappear from the World. So here you go. The author here is, I'll put the name on the screen because I'm probably going to mess this up, but the author's name is Genki Kawamura, right? So this book is essentially about a young man, the main character, who remains nameless, I believe, throughout the story. And he leads a pretty boring, average life. So he's a postman, and all he's got besides that is movies, a hobby of his, and his cat named Cabbage. His mother passed away prior to where the story takes place, and him and his dad don't really have a strong relationship, and they haven't talked in a really long time. So basically, the main character, he goes to the doctors and he finds out that he's got really progressed cancer and it can't be cured, and he's going to die soon. And so he's obviously distraught and he's shocked, and he goes home and he finds someone that looks just like him, a doppelganger basically. And so we learn that this is the devil coming to him in the form of himself, because he ends up being his own worst enemy, in the sense of he never really lived like how he wanted to, right? Or isn't living how he wanted to. And so the devil makes a deal with him essentially where you can make one thing disappear in exchange for living another day. So the story just follows him throughout. It's a 7-day journey. It's written in the form of a letter, and it follows him throughout the 7 days of his prolonged life and what disappears and when he decides to stop it, when that's enough of this deal with the devil here. So throughout this last week of his life, he basically discovers that his life was both more meaningless than he thought and less meaningless than he thought. And so I know that it's very contrasting, but it's basically where one of the examples here is he makes cell phones disappear in exchange for one more day of living. And so when these phones disappear, he's thinking a lot about what losing each of these items means to him specifically. And so our character here, he has an ex-girlfriend, and when they were dating and when they were, meeting each other, they talked a lot on the phone. Their relationship was basically built through the phone. And so he thinks about what would have happened if they didn't meet through the phone. Would they have a stronger relationship, a better relationship? Would it not have ended? Or would they never even met in the first place? And so he thinks about how he was really dependent on these physical things. And then of course there's just the thought of when there's no phones as one of the things, you're doing a lot more present activities. So he goes out and people are reading books, or they're listening to music, or they're not doing anything, they're just walking, they're doing their tasks. And so he realizes that we don't need all this stuff. We don't need to constantly have items. That's a big part of the story as well. Through these disappearances, he learns that things aren't as simple as he once thought, where phones disappear, clocks disappear, and the world just keeps on turning. But he realizes how these individual things are affecting people's lives, where when clocks disappear, his father, who he no longer talks to, a clock repairman, is now out of a job. He has to find another passion. Or when movies disappear, and a friend of his from high school, who was a big movie connoisseur, now has no more passion for something. And so when he realizes things like this, it makes him realize his own passions. As per the title, there's also the cat Cabbage, who's a big part of the story. So at some point, the cat starts talking, which is obviously the devil's doing. Cats don't usually do that. But he kind of builds a more human-like relationship with his cat through the means of communication with words. And the cat actually ends up talking some sense into him, surprisingly. Where the cat, at the end of the story, kind of just helps him decide, to think about what he wants for the first time, not the first time, but for one of the first times where he's really like, what do I want? Because he's realized that he's lived a lot of his life kind of just not passionate about anything, not feeling strongly about anything, and just kind of floating around. And so the cat helps him do that. To connect this book to, my life or things that are currently happening, as of yesterday, the seniors graduated, right? And so obviously it's a lot lower stakes than dying, but their situation can sort of connect to our protagonist here in the book, where a lot of my senior friends from sports and classes and such have been telling me that time like flies and that they want me to cherish. They've been using that word a lot. They want me to cherish my time. And so it's a similar idea of how he's about to die and he's thinking, oh no, I didn't use my time wisely. Like I didn't do enough because I thought I would have more time. And so that relates to the seniors where 4 years is a long time when you're a freshman such as myself, but when you're a junior and senior, you've got no more time. And so that's kind of the idea of this book and of situations in the real world. Moving over to The Memory Police, here's the cover. And the author, once again I'll put it on the screen, her name is Yoko Okawa, right? And so a rundown of this book. Essentially, there is a main character, our protagonist, and she lives on this island, and all that she's got in her life is her house, her books, she's an author, and her editor, his name is R. Both her parents are deceased by now in the story, or before the story even starts, and this island she lives on, things just disappear. They wake up in the morning, the residents, and something feels off. They look around and maybe a cup's disappeared, and you just have to find a new way to drink stuff. Or one of the disappearances is clocks, which is definitely one also in this book, but it's definitely a big one because now there is no more time. Time is a human-made concept that has now disappeared. But that's besides the point. In this book, when things disappear, the vast majority of citizens just forget them. So a cup is gone at first, and then you just start to forget what a cup was. They're all gone, you don't know anymore, you don't need it anymore. But there are a select few people on this island that do not forget. They remember everything, and they know that these things are gone, and they know what they were. And so the memory police come after them. And so that's the premise of the story. Her editor, R, remembers. And so when she finds this out, she's afraid. She doesn't want him to be taken away. So she hides him in a secret room underneath the floorboards, underneath the rug of her house, right? And so this book kind of explores the topics of how memories and remembering things that make up who you are. So big spoiler alert, but in the end of the book, everything has disappeared. So everything that made, we'll rephrase, they disappear. She's no longer existing. And so in the beginning portion of the book, things are disappearing that are objects, things you could have. So at some point, books disappear and she is no longer an author, which was a very, very, very large part of her identity. But eventually things start disappearing, such as body parts. So she wakes up one day and she doesn't know what to do with this thing attached to her hip. But it's just her left leg. She just doesn't remember anymore. She's forgotten. It's disappeared. And so in the end, her body parts are disappearing, and then eventually she's nothing but a voice, and her voice disappears. And so it's basically an idea is that you are your memories, you are what you know. And that's something that you would think can never be taken away from you, but this book shows otherwise, that at some points you can forget. When things disappear, she states that she feels it in her heart, like there's a hole. And so when she's forgetting these things that are important to her, to who she is, to memories with her mother or her father, to memories with an old man she has a friendship with, it's negatively impacting the way she feels. She doesn't know why. And so that's why the idea of remembering things is so important, because even if something doesn't exist anymore, if you know it, it will always exist in your mind. But the idea is that these things no longer exist anywhere except for the minds of the people who cannot forget. This book, in a less direct way, can also relate to all the seniors that are leaving this year, where they are leaving behind a very formative 4 years of their childhood, of their life, and to be able to remember all this, not just the learning, the math, the equations, but the experiences and things they've learned, is really important for them right now. Where if you forget, it's like it didn't even happen, and it's like it disappeared. So that's how this book can relate to that as well. All in all, these two books here are greatly different, but are also very similar. So they both explore the topics of what it means to remember, what it means to forget. They're contrasting and similar in those ways. And so overall, they're both very good books, and they both really make you kind of think a lot about if you really need these material things, but also what they can mean to you